May I introduce to you my new wife, Collette?
The wild days are done, eh?
On the contrary, the wild days have just begun.
You've married a literary entrepreneur.
You've married a country girl without a penny to her name.
We're doomed, aren't we? Willy is a brand. I take all the risk and there's still no money. We need more output. You could write.
My school stories?
Yes, that could be Willy's next novel.
Are you writing for him too?
Yes.
He's made you one of his ghosts already.
My name is Claudine. I live in Montigny. I shall probably not die there.
It's beautiful.
We've never had one fly off the shelves like this before. And do you know who's buying it? Young women.
Really? Willy, your book will change the world! Claudine!
Subtle as ever.
I have a little plan to turn Claudine into the most popular girl in the entire world.
I believe Willy based Claudine on your school days.
Yes, I think I had a little something to contribute.
Finally, we have a success, and then you imply that I'm not the true author of it. People love to talk. I understand the mentality here. You don't.
I understand it well enough to write a book that's a toast to Paris.
You've done something important. All those young girls, we've given them a voice. You should own up to it.
He was after you.
Your jealousy is misplaced.
How so?
It was the wife I found interesting.
We're holding dynamite here. It could blow our bloody heads off.
Since when have you considered scandal to be a bad thing?
Oh, how interesting. Your love line splits into 3.
Must get used to marriage.
Better to make marriage get used to you.
People are begging for more.
I don't want to write another Claudine.
Are you out of your mind? Right!
No one can take away who you are.
Destroy these. Incinerate them.
You found me when I knew nothing. You molded me to your own desires. And you thought that I could never break free. Well, you're wrong. The hand that holds the pen writes history.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Whoa! You guys are excited, aren't you?
Hello, Toronto!
This is a very exciting night for us.
I'm really freaking excited to be here tonight.
What a great audience.
I'm so excited to be here. It's such a great honor.
And I'm so honored to be able to show my film to this august crowd.
What's really fun is people who love film, and you are all that, and we're very proud and happy to be here with all of you.
We should not be afraid to tell stories because we are afraid that people will judge.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity and a platform to be able to showcase our work as female filmmakers.
This is for my parents who couldn't come, so thank you. I'm going to prove it to them. I did it!
I've just realised what TIFF actually stands for. Toronto is fantastic.
This is the story of our city, and we're a very proud city, and I want the world to see it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming out on this rainy, rainy day to the TIFF press conference for Collette. We are very, very lucky to have with us the director and co-writer of the film, Westmoreland, and 2 of its stars, Denise Goff and Keira Knightley. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm going to ask the first couple to start us out, and then we will be taking questions from the audience, so or from all of you. Wash, what was the thing that hooked you? What was the spark that really made you want to tell this story right now?
The initial inspiration came from Collette herself. She's such an incredible personality, such a brilliant writer, such a life force. And it was through reading her books and reading biographies about her that actually my co-director, Richard Glatzer, first had the idea. He said, this is going to be an incredible film. And we focused in on Colette's first marriage as being this just compelling narrative of a woman creating while a man was taking credit. So the thing within you is, when is she going to find her voice? When is she going to break free? So that was the kernel of the idea that inspired the film.
I thought it was a really great thing to narrow your focus to that. Was there any temptation to show more of the Collette that she became, or did you know that getting her to this point was what you...
I think to show more of Colette's life would become a miniseries, or actually there's probably enough in it for 3 or 4 series. I mean, she really lived a very full life, but it seemed that the marriage clearly defined. It starts with their courtship, it ends with their separation, and there's so much happening in gender roles at that time, at the turn of a century, that women are speaking up and demanding more access to power, and men, typically a lot of powerful men are trying to quell that. And it seemed a lot of that seemed to be sort of focused through this relationship of these 2 tremendous characters in this very dynamic and interesting marriage.
Where we're definitely going to get into the gender stuff for sure. But first, Denise, I'd love to know how much you knew of Collette and how you came into this project.
I knew nothing of Collette, which is embarrassing, but I think it's a sign of we don't really learn about these women in the history books, which maybe is something that we can start changing. So it came to me through Wash, who saw me in a play that I did, and I was sent the script and asked to put myself on tape for it, and I knew I wanted to be part of the story in any capacity. And when I was offered the part, it was such a privilege. As somebody who has, my whole background is in theatre, so nobody knew who I was in film, and to be allowed to take on this role, I'll be forever grateful for it.
And Keira, same question to you. How much did you know of Collette?
I knew a little bit. I knew Gigi, the musical, and then my mum, who is a writer, had been obsessed with Collette. So she had read all of the Claudine novels, and that had hugely influenced her work. So I was sort of aware of that. And I'd read Cherie and The Last of Cherie and loved those. So I was aware, but I didn't know anything about her life story. And I didn't know about Willy, and I didn't know about this relationship. So I was, as soon as the script came in, I just thought, oh, that's a good woman, So I feel very lucky to have been a part of it.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what excited you about her? Like what kind of a trailblazer she was?
She's just fascinating. I mean, I think that it's the fact of a woman who is so empowered. It's the story of a woman who's finding her voice, who's finding her true self, and allowing herself to live courageously in the way that she wants to. I don't know, I felt like I stood very tall when I played Collette. I think that she was a maverick, and that's always exciting to play.
With a lot of stories about writers, it's often their novels are known, and then there's the secret life that happened behind the writing. With Collette, she was living it all out in public, and then the potency of her writing was deriving from the honesty with which she conveyed a lot of these experiences that were new, that were groundbreaking. She was a true explorer.
And she did it really publicly, at a time when it wasn't... we live in a different time now where we can be very public with however we choose to live our lives. But back then it wasn't like that. For a woman to behave the way that she behaved, so true to herself, so publicly, it was completely inspiring. Took real courage.
I do want to talk about that. It's rare that we see women who are unafraid of their desires. A lot of stories that we see of women are women who sort of come to terms with their desires, or they have to grow into ownership of them or something. Whereas these characters, they know what they want and they go for it in a really interesting way.
Yeah, I mean, we were actually weirdly talking about this earlier. This film has a sex scene between Willy and Collette very soon into it, like
First
5
5 minutes?
And there's no negative consequence to that sex scene that is out of marriage, you know, and actually that's even now, that's quite a powerful statement to say, yeah, they had a shag in the barn and it was great and they really got on, you know, I mean.
They had a timed shag.
Yeah,
they knew how long
you know, they knew how long, the train was coming, it was all good. You know, I think that is still quite groundbreaking, you know.
But also the sex she was having with women wasn't for the titillation of men either. It was for her.
Yeah.
Her desires were her
Yeah.
own, which
Yeah.
was, I think it's incredible.
I think one of the things about her writing that's most famous is her connection to nature and what she felt was natural. And she was brought up by a very strong mother who very much empowered her to believe in herself. And her identity, even in Paris at the height of a sort of sophisticated demi-monde scene, was very much as a country girl. And she just went with what she felt was natural in all areas of her life. And it overrode any kind of social mores around, you know, same-sex relationships or whatever she wanted to do. When she went onto the stage, that was another huge break with kind of bourgeois tradition. So she just went with what she felt was natural, and that's what's inspiring, and that's why she could be ahead of her time, approximately 100 years ahead, that she's connecting with a lot of ideas and discussions that are happening today.
Now, obviously, any period piece has to connect with today, but there are so many relevances. I mean, you know, we'd say it was 100 years ago, but it also still feels like yesterday or tomorrow. That women are trying to claim ownership of their stories, that there are powerful men who don't want to cede ground. Talk a little bit about how important it was for all of you to tell a story like that right now.
Yep.
Go on, Keira.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that's why I wanted to do it. You know, I mean, I think I instantly felt connected to this story, partly because of, you know, the fact of Willy taking credit for her work, of her in a way being silenced because somebody else was literally stealing her words. You know, I thought that was very relevant. You know, and yep.
I mean, the story is happening 1,000 times a day all over the world, you know. It's kind of like, you know, often the power structures are male, and often women are, you know, in sort of lesser positions coming up with ideas that then are co-opted and not given credit for. I've been in so many discussions with my friends who have said, yes, that happened to me at work, you know, and I feel like it's very in tune with the Time's Up movement, that it's time for women to be given credit and be given access to power through control of the narrative, which is what Collette does in this film.
And Denise, I love how it's your character who sort of nudges her even just that little bit more toward honesty. You know, for me, it was very nice that was a woman character talking to another woman character, because, you know, even still, there's all these measurements by which we see that there are very rarely times when women talk to each other in movies about anything other than a man. So talk a little bit about how you felt about being in a movie that, you know,
that spoke that way. Yeah. Also, what I love about Missy, and she said in the film, Missy says, you know, it's easier for me than a woman of no means. You know, she had eyes on herself and knew that she was a woman who had money, and so she was more able to be herself, or how she identified, because she presented as a man, and so she wore suits before, when it was illegal for a woman to do so. And I think that I mean, we do talk about men to each other in those scenes, but it's more about the empowering of each other. She sees, I think it's the line she says, you should take, you should take credit for your work, you know. And so I think that speaks to today too, that it's not just a conversation about men and women, but women need to be empowering each other to take credit for their work.
I think it's really interesting as well, the contrast between Missy and Willy on Colette's life. Willy is, you know, using masculinity in a very egotistical way. It's all about him. It's all about his own self-promotion. Missy is a woman who embraces masculinity, but it's a different kind of masculinity. It's a masculinity, it's about sort of self-realization, about sort of personal strength, and about supporting someone she loves and cares for. So it's very much a contrasting take on masculinity.
Yeah, it's just about being able to move through the world in the way that you want. Yeah, which is so hard for women. Then and of course now. Now I know people create characters from the inside out, but there is also sometimes an outside-in component. Was there a piece of wardrobe or something that you really, when you touched it, you sort of knew it was like a key into Collette and Missy?
There was a waistcoat There was a waist. There was a particular waistcoat. It has quite a lot. It's sort of almost like feathers on it, and I was like, "Yep, that was it." Yep.
And what did that tell you about?
I don't know. I think again, in her, she was always sort of described as being quite boyish, which for modern audiences today, if you're doing a period film and she's wearing dresses the entire time, it's kind of quite difficult to get that boyishness across. So I don't know, for some reason the waistcoats and the shirts kind of added that kind of quality of boyishness that I was sort of looking for. I mean, we also did a thing where I didn't wear any corsets in it so that my movement could be ever so slightly different to everybody else. So again, she could kind of be more relaxed and sort of in her own skin than kind of forced to be standing.
Yeah, we talked a lot about movement because in the movie, Collette goes from 19 years old to 34 years old, and you see a great development in her growing up into a fully realized woman. And we talked about how that would affect her body language, her voice, her energy projection. It's something that before the film, we looked at Sissy Spacek in Coal Miner's Daughter for that incredible transition that she did, and thought, how can we bring that to this character? And Keira does this incredible job. If you look at where she is at the end of the film and just flash back to the beginning, it's this whole growth of this person you've seen emerge.
Yeah, I don't think people who've never worn a corset understand. You can't even slump. You can't relax. You can't. Yeah. Was there a piece?
Well, for me, I cut all my hair off, so that helped, which caused utter chaos in the theatre when they had to try and make wigs because I was doing a play at the same time. So yeah, cutting my hair off because we talked about wearing a wig to. There's movement that happens, so cutting my hair off helped, but also Andrea found me a hat, and I bound my breasts, which Missy would have done at the time, and so that helped. But there was a hat that Andrea, our costume designer, found that was so odd, like it just really felt like Missy's hat, but mostly it was the hair thing,
I think partly with the costumes as well, it has to be, most of them, normally on a period film, you make the costumes. These were actually all original. Yeah. So she literally looked around the world. They were falling apart.
Keira had to wear a lot of
I had a lot of double stick. All of my costumes were stuck to me. So which kind of limited the movement that we were talking about, but whatever. But that was quite extraordinary as well, because you're literally sort of standing there in a piece of history. And I think that helped.
Yeah, and thinking of who had worn it, the bodies that had been in it.
The stains that were on it,
Well, interesting, in one of the very early scenes, a carriage pulls up outside a salon for Collette to make her debut in society, and she's fiddling around, and it's a toothpaste stain. So it's a costume drama, but the stains are on the costumes, and that's really what we wanted to say. It's not presented as something distant, it's intimate. These people have real bodies, and bodies make stains and problems for clothes. So we kind of worked with that idea and that philosophy for all the costumes and the production design.
I'm going to open it up to all of you now. So you know the drill, right? You raise your hand, someone will get you a mic, and I'll call on you in turn. Yes. Front row, please.
Yes. My name is Mariana from Esquire for Keira. This is a story about a woman who finds her voice. So who helped you find your own voice as an actress? And when do you consider you begin to be heard?
Okay. Who helped you find your own voice as an actress? And what was the second part? Sorry?
In which point in your career do you consider you began to be heard?
Began to be heard.
Who helped me find my voice? I've worked with some amazing people. So I think the confidence that it's given me to work with some amazing actors, actresses, directors, and to feel heard and to feel listened to has given me confidence. This is really corny.
It was me.
It was me. My mother. Ultimately, actually, my mum, she could only have a second child that was me because they needed money, and she wrote a play, and it was called When I Was a Girl, I Used to Scream and Shout. And because of the money from that, she could have another baby. And I think she's always said, live your life like the title of that play. Scream and shout until people hear you. And I've lived by that. And I continue to try and scream and shout and try and say, I am here, and I have ideas, and I want to work, and I want to get better. And I think ultimately she has always gone, get better, work harder, keep going.
I love that you're the product of a work ethic. I think that's fantastic. Also in the front row here.
Keira, picking up on your other comment, do you have there been occasions where you feel that other people have taken credit for your successes, be they co-stars or producers or other people in the film industry?
No, I mean, look, the film industry is a collaboration, and I'm always very, very, very happy to say that any film that has worked, any performance that has worked, it's been the product of a wonderful collaboration between people. Yes, of course, there's been times where I've put an idea out there and nobody's listened, and then 5 seconds later a guy's put the same idea out there and everyone's gone, wow, great idea. You know, I mean, that's what happens to women all over the world. So yeah, of course that's happened. But no, I mean, I think that there is, particularly with actresses, you know, I think there's a dialogue where people are constantly looking for the Svengali. You know, the actress is the muse and the director is the kind of person that creates them. I've always felt a bit funny about that because I think it's a collaboration. I think it's a conversation. It's not about one person controlling another person. So I suppose I've sort of riled against that a little bit. But no, there's been no specific point where I feel like somebody's gone, oh, I did that.
It's not as easy for an actor to have the work stolen, I suppose.
No.
But it does happen with screenplays a lot. When you get that single screenplay credit, often there's been quite a number of writers on that. Yeah. So there's a number of Colettes out there right now.
Yeah, it's also, you know, there's that great line, women writers don't sell. And, you know, I think we still have that sense of the stories about women don't sell, which I think is ridiculous. And every movie that has a woman as the protagonist is like a brand new idea that we have to prove whether this works or not.
But it continues to be, we continue to show that that is not the truth. Like every single time there is films made by and starring and written by women, they are successful. So we've got to stop with the kind of, I think we keep putting out there that, you know, it's even saying it, it's just rubbish. It's
a surprise.
Yeah, it's rubbish.
With the women writers don't sell thing, it's really interesting if you look at a lot of 19th century women authors, like who went under male pen names, like, you know, George Eliot and George Sand, and the Bronte sisters were published under Courier Bell and Acton Bell and Alice Bell. And there was this sense that, you know, I suppose reading a book, you were entering someone's mind and seeing someone's worldview, and it was easier to put those books out into the world if it wasn't perceived as you were entering a woman's point of view. And so Willy expresses that. I think it was something that he was reflecting a commercial reality at the time that Collette was challenging. I think the same is currently happening in cinema in all areas of life, this kind of misperception that a female point of view would be non-commercial because it wouldn't be accepted as being as valid as a male point of view.
Yeah, I keep telling everybody, you know, the Time's Up movement is brand new. We have to keep thinking of it as brand new and not over or in the middle or anything like that. But have you noticed, any of you, a change? Is there a different way that people are talking in rooms? Is there anything out there?
Well, the fact that we're talking at all about this stuff now is brilliant, but it can't just be a conversation. You know, it's like awareness, acceptance, and then action. You can't just sit in the conversation. We have to keep it moving, you know, and that takes not just women, it's men. Like, it's all of us are part of that conversation. It's not like we're now, you know, anti-men. It's just, it's raising the matriarchy to meet the patriarchy. There's room for both. It's so.
I think Time's Up and Me Too are having a massive effect, and I think they just seem to appear so quickly because the issues have been so present for so long, and it just came to that massive tipping point. Now I don't think it can go back because I think it's been an awareness that has changed. And I have worked with companies since then who have done, you know, very detailed training before a production starts around gender issues and how, you know, how the workplace is to be conducted in a way that's equal and has, you know, an equal access for everybody.
Keira, have you noticed a change or any kind of uptick? Or
I think it's a process, but I mean, I would say that the conversation is a massive start. You know, just the fact that we're saying, yes, we need more female voices, we need more female directors, we need, you know, we need this point of view, and obviously we need safety in the workplace as well. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a hunger right now for strong female voices, and I think that's great. And we just need to make sure that that's not a flash in the pan. That's not because, you know, a load of journalists are going, so how many female directors have we got this year? You know, and all that kind of stuff. We need to actually make sure that it's proper change.
question in the front row. Here you go.
Hello, Tamara, Icon London Magazine, and a question for Keira. You mentioned that you read a lot of Collette books while you were growing up. The question is, obviously, while reading the books, you probably had a certain image of Collette and Claudine. How much did that image change during the film?
Well, I hadn't read the Claudine novels before I started the film, so I read those just before we started shooting. I think I based a lot of what I saw of her from the Claudine novels. You know, I felt like she was writing as herself. You know, it was her stories. Okay, probably made, you know, slightly more interesting because that's what drama's about. But you know, I felt like her voice was really clear in those novels, and particularly the vagabond. You know, I felt like that was where I was aiming for, was the vagabond. So, I mean, it was hugely helpful for me. Not that we were doing those stories as the film, but just kind of going, well, this is the woman's work, and this is what's important, and this is, you know, this was her view of the world. It's hugely helpful as an actress to be able to go, oh, great, okay, fine, I can step into that.
And all of that was true, right, Wash? All of that, the sensation around the Claudine novels and how enormous the popularity was.
What Collette did in the Claudines that was revolutionary was write the character of a young sort of teenage girl who was very honest about the world and had a sort of self-confidence that allowed her to see through the adult world, and a sort of knowledge of her own sensuality. And it stepped into, the word teenager wasn't really invented. I found the first reference to it was 1920, because in the screenplay I was thought, oh, we should say teenager. But instead, Missy says all those young girls between girlhood and womanhood, because the word teenager hadn't been invented yet. What Collette did was define Claudine as a teenager. And Paulère, the character who plays Claudine on stage, said, we all felt we were her. Like they all identified with this idea of, I'm this young woman who knows that the world is different to, you know, the rules that have been set down, and I can have that power to sort of navigate my way around it. So in Claudine, Collette defined this very empowering young teenager, one of the first teenagers. Interestingly, Willy, who was kind of, you know, claiming he owned the books, was really seeing something different in them. He was going for the sort of naughty schoolgirl angle and looking for it for titillation, whereas Collette was looking at it as a vehicle for liberation. I think that's one of the fascinating things about this piece of art, about the Claudine novel.
There was a question in the second row here on the aisle.
Hi, I'm Alessandra De Tommasi from Westmoreland, Italy. My question is to Keira. I would like to ask you, at this stage of your career, what kind of roles are you looking for? I don't know if you have a bucket list or you maybe in the past has refused some roles because there were stereotypes or something that just felt off or wrong for you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think I've always, since I've been lucky enough to be able to choose the roles that I take in the films that I'm a part of, predominantly I've tried to play complex, strong, interesting, well-rounded women. I mean, I think if there's something apart from corsets that joins the career together, you know, then hopefully it's been that. With the occasional money gig thrown in there as well, you know. But yeah, so that's what I continue to do. You know, I'm continuing to try and look for women that in some way I recognize. You know, I want to see my friends up on screen, my friends who are not saints, who are not simply there to make their boyfriends or girlfriends feel good about themselves, you know, who are complex, strange, wonderful women. And they're the kind of characters that I want to see. I want to see people who are struggling with the difficulties in the world and making mistakes but standing back up again, you know. I mean, is there a bucket list? Is there a bucket list? No, not really. I think it would be much handier for my agents if there was a bucket list, you know. But no, I mean, you know, I sort of search and try and find characters that inspire me, and that doesn't mean saints. I'm never that interested in looking for a saintly thing. I'm always the slightly more morally ambiguous women are the ones that I'm really interested by.
Is there another question out there at the moment? Yes, in the front row here. Oh, sorry. You'll
Joe
be next.
Alvarez, Icon Magazine. Keira, your mum was into Collette. What was her reaction when you told her you got this gig?
She was thrilled. She was like, yes, go on. Yeah, she hasn't seen the film yet. She's looking forward to London Film Festival because she's coming to the premiere there. So she's very excited about the film, yeah.
How do you prepare with your family commitments? You have little ones. How hard is it to travel and to do everything else?
It's hard. You know, yeah, it's hard. I've got a 3-year-old. She's magnificent. She's a lot of work. You know, and we delayed shooting this by a year because originally we were going to do it when she was 1, and sleeping has never been a thing that she's been that fond of. And I realized playing a character of this size, I was like, I can't do this. So we waited until she was 2. And she still didn't sleep, but I was a bit more used to it by then, you know.
And she was there.
And she was there, and we made, you know, and it was amazing. You know, I've really tried to make sure that when she's very small, there's been a safe place on the set that she can come to for just half an hour, so that we touch base, so that, you know, I'm with her, we're connected. My husband has been amazing. He's been traveling with me since we had the kid. He's largely put his life on hold to make sure that I'm still at work and that we're keeping together as a family unit. You know, I'm super lucky. I can afford childcare. I have a wonderful nanny who has traveled with us as well. And again, she's there with the kid. I feel completely safe that Edie is good. And my mum, whenever my husband can't be there, has flown to wherever we are to make sure again that, you know, Edie. So keeping women in the workplace, I mean, they say it takes a village to raise a child, and it does. And it takes a village to keep a woman at work as well. But if that's where she should be, then everybody is very supportive, and it's possible.
I was so inspired seeing the way you committed to Edie and balanced the work, because there was time, you know, so much time every day that was sacred for mother and daughter, but then there was never a moment where you didn't come in just absolutely fully tuned into what was happening in the film. So it was incredible that you managed that tightrope that you walked.
It is a tightrope. Thank you very much.
With such good balance. Wash, what did you have to do to get the film? Did you say, like, no, we're just going to cool our heels for a year because it's worth it? Like, how hard was that for you?
It was. He
loved it. He was thrilled.
No, obviously, it's always a little anxiety creating when a film gets pushed. But now looking back on it, I'm so happy we had that extra year. It just in terms of the way the project was evolving in my mind, it came on leaps and bounds in that time. That I knew there was a film coming, and I knew I could plan every single detail of it, and very much into preparation. So an extra year, and you know, I actually wrote another screenplay during the downtime, which I've now just filmed in Japan. So I didn't waste my time. But
you're welcome.
The extra year actually was tremendously useful to get this in the right place.
And it kind of couldn't have landed at a better time. I mean, I feel like landing this year is sort of how it was meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, the screenplay was originally written by my co-writer, co-director, and late husband, Richard Glatzer, in 2001. So it's taken a long, long time. It's taken 17 years. It's a third of my life waiting for this film to come to the big screen, but it came at exactly the right time. It's almost as if Collette is up on high going, now. You know?
Wow. There was a question on, in the aisle right here. Mm-hmm.
This is a question for Wash. If there was a Missy and Collette miniseries, would totally watch that. That was such an incredible part of the film. Congratulations on the film. Jessica Wong from CBC. I wanted to ask you, could you speak a little bit about the importance of Collette as sort of like as a positive LGBTQ story, and sort of the depiction of this of the fascinating, beautiful relationship that Denise and Keira played, and it's such a positive, like, wonderful thing as juxtaposed to her earlier relationship?
Thank you so much for that question. One of the things that really appealed to Richard and I about this story, it was a story of a heterosexual marriage, yet was completely queer. It was LGBT and Q. It has just so much going on that's about sort of, opening up sexual definitions. This was at a time before any of the words lesbian, gay, trans, bisexual were in common usage. And I think at the beginning of the modern age, we think of it as, inventions of telephones and motor cars, but also people like Collette were sort of pioneers in terms of, you know, the new sexual landscape around gender and sexuality. I always found Missy just a completely fascinating character, because she was a woman who was, you know, really reaching towards masculinity for her authentic self, and was in many ways a forerunner of today's butch lesbian community, and also, you know, transgender. But before those words really existed. So I just found her this really, you know, sort of inspiring character to be so early to portray her true self, not only in private but in public. And from Colette's writings about her, the intensity of their love is apparent. And I wanted to convey that after this marriage with Willy, which was, you know, very much based around his domination and male power, that the liberation Collette found in this new love was, with Missy, was just extremely liberating for her as a woman and as an artist. So that's, in a way, the Collette and Missy relationship sort of happens towards the end of the film, and Colette's final commitment to Missy in, you know, near the end of the film. I just feel like it's a very sort of natural, earned, truthful ending about Colette's openness and her love for Missy.
Anybody have a question? Yes, right. Thank you.
Hi, Kate Young, freelancer. There's a question for Wash. In the year that you had the film delayed, were there any specific narrative changes that were made that you're grateful you had the time to work with?
Oh, sorry, one more time?
Sure. In the year that the film was delayed, were there any specific narrative changes made that you are grateful that you had the time to work through?
Oh, yes, actually. In the year the film was delayed, I was writing with a co-writer called Rebecca Lenkowitz, who is a brilliant British writer. She wrote the movie Ida, and she and I worked together, and she had a very profound influence on the way you know, sort of the interior life of Collette. She just brought a lot more understanding and depth to Colette's interior. And, you know, that's kind of, I thought, oh, this is great working with a woman writer. She would bring so much to Collette. She also brought so much to Willy in terms of, like, we'd just have fun inventing. Because he was, you know, always about this kind of barbed wit, but then also he was so much, you know, was so much fun in his pomposity. And she brought tremendous contributions towards Willy. So I'd say, writing-wise, it was working with Rebecca that really, really helped shape it up for the production.
Another question back there? I will ask you in the meantime, for all of you, is there like a moment or a sentence or something that you're glad you were able to put on screen, that you were glad that you were able to put out there?
Yeah, I think for me it was the moment of you should take credit for it. I think that saying that to a woman who was whose talents were being stolen by somebody else, that felt really good. And also to say I love you too. At that time, you know, I just loved playing that relationship so openly. So all of it really, but those two particularly.
I really like the line when Collette says, "I can read you like the top line of an optician's chart." Just thought that was a good one.
Was it one of yours or Rebecca's?
Yeah.
I think that was one of mine.
I mean, it's got to be the final speech to Willy, where, you know, oh God, I can't remember it, but you hurt and you hurt and you hurt, and you think that by saying I'm a man, that's what men do, you clear it all away. And I was like, huh. You know, so I think that whole, it felt like it was coming from the womb, you know, and I've spoken to some women afterwards, and, you know, and they felt the same.
It was interesting because when Collette was first written in 2001, Keira was very young and not someone we'd sort of think of for the part, because you were you were Claudine at that point. But when I saw Pride and Prejudice, and there's that scene where you rip Mr. Darcy a new one, me and Richard were both like, wow, this actress is really, really strong. She has like a
really
laser
good at
beam.
telling people off.
And so that final scene where, you know, Collette really confronts Missy, it was something I knew was very much that Keira would just be able to dig into. But yeah, I was still completely astonished on set what you did with that scene at that moment. On the very last day of the shoot, it was as extraordinary. And I think we did about 8, we did all the coverage, we did about 8 takes, and we were totally done. And I said, do you think there's one more? And Keira just did this final take, 95% of it which is used, and often without an edit, because it was just such a pure flow of exactly who the character was and exactly that moment. And it was, the crew just burst into applause. It was like a magical moment where Collette and Keira were in the room.
We were one. You know, it is the Willy thing is so interesting because the movie lets it all be ambiguous and ambivalent in terms of the fact that yes, he took credit for it, but he also was the one who said you should write, and he locks her in a room, but when she's locked in that room, she's writing.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a very interesting. Talk a little bit about calibrating that character.
It's very complex because Willy was, he was a mentor, but he was also an exploiter of Collette. And he was someone who would be a pitch guy, like he could take over the room with an anecdote, yet he was scared of the blank page. Whereas she was a naturally creative engine who could just write and got an access to the world and access to the power through writing. Willy was certainly a villain, and there's no justifying what he did. What we show in the film is a complexity to his character, that when powerful men behave badly, it's not often like there's devil's horns coming out of their head. They can be super charming, they can be funny, they can be witty, they can wield things from the armory, psychological weapons, emotional weapons, sexual weapons to keep women down. It's not just about sort of financial and economic and class structures. There's also these personal methods. So to show that the relationship had this complexity, and Dominic did this so brilliantly, to show that Willy is someone, if you met in person, you might be very charmed by, but it was his inherent selfishness and egotism that was ultimately his kind of undoing, and the reason why Collette had to escape him.
Did you want to jump in on that, Keira?
No, I was actually, he said it all. I was in agreement.
There was such a tenderness as well that
Yeah,
comes across between them, especially the way she treats him.
Well,
There's
I
such a
think that's what
kindness.
we talked about a lot, was you had to understand why she stayed. You know, to respect her, you have to understand why the relationship works. Also why essentially it was the best thing that she left him, but but that laughter, that sense of humor, that charm, that charisma, that you can be laughed into bed, and it was sort of like really important that was very much there, that he wasn't just this sort of domineering, because actually in all the writing about him, I think the charm and the wit is something that hugely comes through. And again, Dominic, who's not here at the moment, but I mean, my God, he's good. And he is, I mean, just as a person, I think he's so charming. He's so charming. He's the only person that I've ever met who I think if he actually killed somebody in front of you, he'd get away with it. So he really does. He's got that thing that I think Willy has, which is just amazing.
But it stops her from being a victim when you play those scenes the way you two played them. It meant that you're not kind of feeling sorry for her in a way.
Even when she's locked in a room, which it's the very moment of his sort of despicable control over her. And he locks the key and he shouts, "Right," and he walks away. And there's this moment when Collette turns and looks at the writing desk, and she walks slowly towards it, and there's this internal battle going on, that to write is to submit what he wants, but it's also giving her an access to power.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, and when you see her writing, the nibs exploding with ink, and she's like tearing into the page with anger as she writes, and it becomes another bestseller. Saying behind this work of art that everyone was reading and discussing, there was this narrative about a woman just like really trying to find her voice underneath this very difficult circumstance, but realizing that by writing she was putting her thoughts into other people's minds and thereby starting a conversation that changes the world.
Did she, in her lifetime, get credit for the Claudine novels?
Yeah, it was really interesting. When Collette and Willy separated, they had an agreement that both of their names would be on the books. And then later, I think it was in the 1940s, she had a legal motion or a lawsuit to get sole credit, and it was awarded to her, and it went back to Collette. And then Willy's son, Jacques Gauthier Viars, from a previous relationship, who was born out of wedlock, sued to have his father's name put back, and he won. So the next year it went back to Willy, unbelievably, and then Collette went again, and it went back to Collette. And the manuscripts were sort of really important in that respect because that was her writing with his little edit notes. So there's an issue in the movie about, the preservation of the manuscripts to prove that it was Colette's writing and Colette's work and Colette's creation, and Willy was just scribbling things in the margins like, more spice.
Yeah. Do we have, yes, one more question here? And then I see you in the back, you're next, thanks.
Keira, you did mention about the way corsets have followed you through your career. Do you think you've worn your last corset now? Do you think you can finally throw them away, burn them?
No, I look really good in a costume. I look great in a gown. I'd love to say, I get offered period pieces and I go, oh no, I can't do another one. And then I go, but I really like them. And I think it's very difficult when it's just the best characters I've been offered. And ultimately, I'm always going to go for the best character, whether I'm in a long dress or a short dress, So, no, probably not. Although I've found various ways now of getting around actually wearing the corset. So I'm pleased with that. So the corsets are pretty much gone, actually.
Can you reveal what secrets do you have?
You can bone the inside of a dress, which means that all you need really is the little waist thing, and you don't actually need the corset at all.
I think for a long time, period pieces have got a reputation for being a kind of safer genre, but I think at the moment there's something happening with period pieces that are radicalizing.
I also think there's a negativity around them because predominantly they're female. I think there's a oh, that's not serious enough, or that's not, and actually, I think it's interesting that the strongest characters that I've found have been in the period roles. I'm not saying that that's throughout the industry, obviously it's not, but just for me, that has been the case. And I think you can never discount your own taste. I think, the idea of, breathing life back into what is dead and done, it's kind of resurrecting the dead in a funny way, doing a period film, and I find that as far as the imagination goes, I find my imagination just goes wild, going, God, let's bring them back. This is amazing.
As well, with this film, we tried to break a lot of the rules of traditional period pieces. Especially, a lot of period pieces they spend 2 hours waiting to get engaged, as Keira said. With this, they're in the barn on the haystack within 5 minutes, and it's kind of like, no, this is kind of a much more sort of direct sexual period piece. And then also with the casting, we tried an approach I don't believe has really been tried before, of just having a very inclusive cast.
It's the most progressive casting I've ever been a part of.
We have trans men playing cisgendered characters. We have trans women playing cisgendered women. We have a out lesbian actor playing heterosexual. We have out gay actor playing someone who said he was heterosexual, we're not quite sure. We have Asian British actors playing characters who is historically white. We have a black actor playing someone who in history was white. And guess what? It all works. It all completely works for the audience. And these have been sacred rules for so long that period pieces have almost been a bastion of kind of whiteness. And we just wanted to shake things up. Collette broke a lot of rules, so we thought we should too.
Here, here. We have time for just that one last question with the lady in the back.
Giovanna Grassi, Corriere della Sera, Italy. Is a short question for all of three. How the location helped you to give us the sense of the time and the personalities of the different characters? And there is a particular location that was important for each of you?
Well, it was actually shot in 3 countries, and location were very important. Of course, in a dream, it would have all been in France. It's very expensive for a foreign production to move into France. So we had one day in Paris, which was amazing, to shoot her walking by the Seine on the streets that Collette walked. That was incredible. But then we shot a lot of the interiors in Hungary, because around the turn of a century, Budapest sort of really, there was a great admiration for Paris, and there was a connection to Paris, sort of the style of Paris. There's a street called Andrassy in Budapest that was based on the Champs-Élysées, and in Budapest they have a Moulin Rouge that was built as a copy of the Parisian Moulin Rouge, and was for many years kind of boarded up, and has just been reopened, and now is very authentic to the original Moulin Rouge. So that, for me, was a location that really brought home, like, okay, Collette and Missy danced at the Moulin Rouge, they caused a riot. We had this location that was just so wonderfully, like, evocative of that time and place, and it was just wonderful to shoot that very big scene there. Keira does, they both Keira and Denise do this incredible dance, and then the riot kicks off, and we just had one day to shoot that whole piece. But something came out of the walls and helped us through on that day.
Well, thank you all very much for coming. Thank you very much for being with us. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.